Welcome to Living in Harmony, a podcast for Christian parents who want to make the peace in their household without sacrificing their sanity. Here, we talk about everything from sibling rivalry to dating and how to raise your kids to be strong in their faith while maintaining your own. But don't worry, we're not all preachy here. That's the purpose of your church and your pastor. Here, we're here for you, to help you know you are not alone in this crazy journey called parenthood. So whether you're a seasoned pro or a brand new parent, Living in Harmony, this is the podcast for you. So grab some coffee or wine, we won't judge, and join us as we navigate the ups and downs of raising kids in a Christian household where the gospel is the center. Well, hello and welcome to Living in Harmony. We hope that you are having a great day. My name is Delmar.
I'm Robert.
And today is the Mancast. That's what we're calling, AKA your wife is really busy right now.
She is really busy. It's a busy week for her.
So people listening, they may not know, but she is very much involved in the homeschool community of Sumter in a very large capacity. And she has, about 1,000 families, roughly, give or take, under her, and she's having to get them all in. So, April, we know you're listening right now. We're going to talk all kind of trash. Not really.
Talk no trash.
No trash, because I eat her cooking and you go home to her. So we're going to keep that straight. But actually, this does provide us a great opportunity today just to sit down and talk about guys, especially like the little guys who live in our house. And
who become big guys. I don't have any little guys in my house anymore.
You never heard that saying, boys will be boys. But the reality is boys will be men. Now, not all of them.
If they're raised right.
You know, adulthood is promised. Male masculinity and manhood is not, especially in the culture we live in today. We're in a time where I was just saw on the news, testosterone levels all-time low, which is telling of something. You know, the gender roles have been usurped and changed, and like, what does it really mean to be a man? And some people say, well, it's a man who's in touch with his feelings and can cry, which we're going to get into all of that. But today, what we really want to do, we want to anchor this conversation in obviously Scripture, so that way we can anchor it firmly in our families. And when we talk about manhood, masculinity, we go back to the creation of man. You know, Adam, Vod is the word being used there, which often implies someone who just creates order out of chaos. And I think it's a beautiful picture in that sense that that's what God our Father did. He not just he created everything, and then he created order, and then he pulled us in on that. And a few fun facts, you know, if you read the account in Genesis, before Adam had Eve, he had a job.
Yep.
You know, name them animals, boy. Take care of things. And we see all these things. And today, what we really want to do is we're trying to break it down. And we try to do this every week. Last week we talked about the Flintstone gummies, chewables of determining tension in the family. But today also we want to break this down kind of in the four legs, because it's easier to grasp some of this picture if we can put it in bite-sized pictures. And what I love, Robert brought this today. So Robert, you want to just kind of give the 50,000 feet of what this is, and then we're going to really just dig into like raising our young men.
Yeah. So the four things here. Yeah. So, you know, way back in the day when I was a young man and trying to figure out what it was to be a man, there was a guy named Steve Farrar who wrote a series of books about manhood, and he was kind of my first exposure to that. And he had a model that he used for it, and he kind of talked about it in four principles of king, warrior, mentor, and friend, and that those four things were like aspects of, you know, the God's purpose for masculinity and for the created order, and how he wanted us to behave. And I've always really liked that model of just how to understand what it is that men are supposed to do.
And honestly, this isn't some like clever marketing scheme model. It's kind of like if you listen to if any church mission statement, it should have somewhere in there evangelizing and discipling. I mean, going and making disciples, a great commission. They're all worded different, but the foundation should be the same. If our church's mission statement is, you know, to help people have a better life and become a better version, well, that's not rooted, because that's not, you know, but oftentimes it is. I know at our church is devoted, connected, reaching. Devoted, you know, to God, connected with each other, reaching the lost. It's all foundational. So what we saying is there are foundational elements of authentic manhood when raising our sons, and they can be broken down. Sometimes the wording is different. I've heard Vodi Balcom use every man should be a priest, prophet, provider, and protector. I love that.
Yeah.
That is so good. But I'm fascinated by this wording today because I think this encapsulates all that as well, but also gives us a little bit more to expand to. So when we talk about a king, if I look to my little son and say, hey, you're a king, that's going to be kind of broad. But what we see is that he has given us a role as the king. He's given us a role when it comes to our children. So when we talk about raising our young boys to have this kingly mindset, this worldview that has that mindset on it, what exactly are we talking about, Robert?
Well, I think we're talking about a couple of different things, and one of the things when you look at what the Bible talks about, right? When he talks about when God tells us what a king is, a king is, you go back and look in 1 Samuel when Israel is rejecting God and wanting a king like the other nations. There's some of the things that they wanted. They wanted someone to go before them and fight their battles. They wanted someone to represent them, to stand for them. They wanted someone to kind of be the figurehead. And I think that's, and those are things that really God had put in place for him to be for them. And they were rejecting that. And that's why God says to Samuel, it's like, don't worry about it. They're not rejecting you as prophet. They're rejecting me as king. And so I'm going to give them this thing. And then he gives them all the warnings about what the king will do. And I think that those aspects are important. And we talk about, you can also talk about the offices of Christ being prophet, priest, and king. And it's that leadership role that I think is there. And when you really look at what the king is, it's really easy, especially in today's context, to say, oh, that's just the patriarchy talking and you just want to be in charge. And that's not really what that role is about. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, there's some authority there, but Scripture also tells us that the man is to be the head of his wife as Christ is the head of the church. And so that means he's sacrificing for his family. That kingship role that Christ has for us, that we model down to our families, that headship role means that I stand between my family. I stand between my wife and trouble. I stand between my family and the enemies, whatever those enemies are, and that I take up that authority for the betterment of my family. So it's not about making myself, putting a crown on myself and sitting on a throne and saying, make me a sandwich. That is not what God is talking about. He's talking about us stepping up and being that shelter for our family, that front runner, that wall, that protector in the way that God does, that Christ does for us.
And it's, in the same sense, it's representative. Mm-hmm. If a country is invaded, who's the first person they kill once they invade the country?
Yeah. They want the capital. They want the king.
They pull the king out. They kill him. The king's the person whose life's on the line a lot of times. So it's not like, oh, you just do as I say. And there again, we have negative tropes of kings, but we're talking about what does it mean to be a good one. And in our households, when raising our children, we have to show them being a king means having dominion, having some domain. So where in our own family do we allow our sons to have some dominion? Another thing that kings are is they can't be passive. Right. Kings cannot be. A passive king gets overthrown. A passive king has no respect from the people who he's supposed to be leading. And also, kings, they generally have a plan. This is an order. This is a way. They put thought into how they're going to lead. So even in our own house, my kids they're young. Okay, I got a 4 and a 6-year-old. The 4 thinks he's like 10 already. But it's important, like for them right now, they're the co-kings of their bedroom.
Yeah.
So you're responsible for this thing. If you want to play the Nintendo Switch, well, you can't be passive and let Legos be all over the floor in the house. Right. They have to be in your bedroom. And I know this translates differently, but us as dads and as mothers, sometimes as we're trying to build these kingship personality in our kids, like it's important that this is gonna be hard to hear, I think, not be a helicopter parent all the time.
Right. Yeah, and I think that example you just had, when you give your boys dominion over part of their room, right? So you're giving them the responsibility to create order in what absolutely can be chaos, right? And this is you can do this with daughters too. This is not just a boy thing, but it's important to do that with and for your sons, to allow them that space so that they can grow into it and be willing to step up and make decisions, to be willing to step up and say, no, I'm gonna do this, not that, when it's appropriate and within the guidelines. And so just like we are under authority from Christ as we are, an authority in our home, your boys can be under your authority while they have some authority, and maybe that's over a pet, a goldfish or a cat or whatever. You're going to take care of that, that puppy you really wanted. So now you got to own that in the sense of have, maintain the order that the puppy is going to try and create disorder in, So I think giving our sons an opportunity to model those things and to practice those things is very, very important.
Yeah, and both on the tangible, but also in the emotional, right? Mm-hmm. Because it is easy for us to just, you can run with this to a bad place. There's plenty of what they call alpha male podcasts out there, which I would argue whether they're just alpha male or they just have a really warped view of what masculinity is, where, I'm a king, man, and you don't get to see my emotion, and I rule this thing, and I pay you, and I do that. No, what we're talking about is a good king, which means we do also not just nurture the environment external, but we nurture the environment internally as well. Mm-hmm. A good king is he is in control of his mind, in the sense that he knows what he should fret over. He knows what he shouldn't fret over. And that's why it's important that we allow them to process that with us too. When things don't go the way that they feel like they should over something they were in charge of, how do we walk our sons through that?
Right. Yeah. And I think part of that is being able to own ourselves, and we're kind of crossing over into the warrior piece as well, right? Because some of this is fighting those enemies, and sometimes that enemy is in myself. So if I'm standing between, as Christ stands between us, me and my sin, between his church, his bride, and the sin that would kill us, we sometimes have to stand as fathers. We have to stand between our family, our children, and the sin that would kill them. And so sometimes we have to guide them in that and protect them through that, which means setting boundaries and setting rules. And sure, our culture is going to tell us, oh yes, you're just domineering and you just want to be in charge.
No.
But that's not really what it is. If you understand what it is that we're supposed to be trying to do, which is to provide protection, we're providing a shelter around our families. The same way when you get in the car, you buckle a seatbelt, right? You want the airbags, you want the safety features. Is that to box our kids in and prevent them from being all over the place? Well, maybe a little bit, but it's for their own good. And it's the same thing in our families. Yeah, we put seatbelts on our kids. We put guardrails around them to make sure that they don't go do the things that are going to hurt them.
And when the guardrails are in place, everything inside those guardrails, you execute authority over them. Mm-hmm. Which means having self-control, being responsible, being proactive, not being passive. And people can say whatever they want about, he shouldn't be the leader. But I promise you this, if it's 1:00 in the morning and I'm asleep and I hear something crash downstairs, I'm not going to look over my wife and be like, hey, you going to go look at that? No, because what does any halfway coherent husband do? He says, that could have been the cat, or it could be a cat burglar.
Yep.
I'm going to go down there, lock the door. I'll figure it out. That's what really the mindset we should be instilling in our children is, hey, you be active. Mm-hmm. Don't be passive in this culture. This culture wants you to be passive. Like that's what, especially the men, the culture knows if it can get the men to be passive, then it can just lord whatever it wants over you, whatever worldview it's trying to shove down your throat and your kid's throat. Right. The last thing it wants is for you to say, hey, there's noise out there. I'm going to go check it. And what we're supposed to encourage our boys to do is like check the noise. And if you realize, we're not talking about just the noise downstairs, the noise around you. Is this good? Like our boys should A king should know the culture in his community. One of the biggest things with fall of Rome, right? It started getting divergent cultures in it. It helped topple Rome. Look at our own look at America right now. I mean, things are not really good at all politically because we have two cultures, maybe three, in our country. And what we're supposed to do is try to provide cohesion in that which we have dominion over. So that means we teach our boys problem solving. We teach them interpersonal relationships. Sometimes you help them fight, right?
But fighting properly and
Exactly.
understanding where those guidelines are. And one of the hardest things that I found as a father, as my kids got older, was knowing when to relax those boundaries. And that was a discussion that we had, in our family is, because April tended to want to keep the kids more protected, and I tended to want to let them out and do things. And I think that's a tension that's really good to live in. And I think that's one of the reasons why God made men and women different in those ways, is that you have, the man is more outward facing and adventurous, and the woman is, tends to be more nurturing and protecting. And you've got that tension because honestly, there are times it's like, go let them play outside. Snakes, trees, whatever. They'll figure it out. And she's like, nope, you got to put that boundary in place. And in that discussion is the appropriate place to be. But allowing our kids and our boys to have that space as they get older to exercise and practice those things in places where it's safe, so that when they get out and into the world, they can manage it appropriately. We do that when they drive. You don't just hand a kid the keys when he turns 16 and say, "Hey, go knock yourself out."
Right.
You practice with them. You teach them what the rules are. You teach them what the physics is of a big piece of steel, hitting another big piece of steel at 60 miles an hour. And you talk to them about how to be safe as they exercise that responsibility. And then, at least in our state, there are graduations of different types of licenses. Oh, you can only drive in the daytime. You can only drive until this time. You can only drive under certain conditions until you get better at it. And then those guardrails relax. And it's the same thing, those same principles should apply in our families. And it's always been weird to me as I started to realize it. We are so open to other types of restrictions in other places in our lives. And in our families, it's like with our kids, no, we can't put anything on there. I don't want to stifle them. It's like, well, you stifle the kid by, making him sleep indoors when he wants to sleep out in the backyard. You stifle him by putting him in a seatbelt. It's all sorts of reasons, all sorts of things that we put restrictions on our kids on.
And also, when by putting restriction on them and teaching them, it's important for us to have the mindset that more than likely, I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. More than likely, your son is someone's future husband. It's some girl's future husband. So what we're really saying is you got to be responsible for her. You have to, which means loving well, which means providing direction, providing some security. A big shift that we've made in our house, which some would say was too late, is, this year my wife said, I'm done working. I really need to not work. I'm just going to, that was scary for me at first. But then I sit back and I'm like, well, that's a value that I have. My value should trump my fear.
Yeah.
And that's where we've stepped into right now. And I'm going to tell you this. And if this gets back to her, I love it. But I absolutely am in love with the woman she is allowed to become now. Yeah. And I'm not saying that every woman shouldn't, but I'm saying my woman. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And that was part of that. The king, because also kings, a good king listens. Yep. So, but all that being said, yeah, we're raising our boys. They should be kingly in the sense they should be taking responsibility. They should be proactive. They shouldn't be passive. They should never pass the buck. They shouldn't pass the blame. They should work it out, which comes right up to the butt of our next one because it's subsidiary to it, but it's very important, is that our young boys should also be warriors.
Yep. And it's really, really easy. Again, our mindset culturally today is, oh, if I'm a warrior, I'm an MMA fighter, or I'm, and it's got this negative connotation that to be a warrior means you're mean. No, it really doesn't. Yeah. As a military officer for a long time, I occasionally got to hang around really, really dangerous men. And most of the time, you don't know who those dudes are unless you know. I work with some guys who in previous active duty lives were extremely dangerous men. And you wouldn't know it by looking at them because that power is under control. And our pastor talked last week about, in the sermon, he talked about growing and being part of that is being humble. And he pointed out that, humility, being gentle is not the same thing as being weak. Your gentleness can be meekness, which is power under control. It's the word that that the Romans used for in the Greek language that they used for a war horse, who's not just a mode of transportation. In that era, the horse fought. Right, they were trained to kick. They would rear up, and they were part of the cavalry officer. Had his horse was an extension of him. A well-trained horse was immensely powerful, and in military terms, a force multiplier. And that's what we're supposed to be. We are the sheepdog sitting under the shepherd's control, right? Well trained. Sheepdog looks a lot like the wolf, but sits at the shepherd's feet, looking outward, standing between the sheep behind him and the real wolves and the danger in front.
I love that language of a warrior is trained. Man, have you ever someone who thinks they're strong and then they go try to execute the strength, and it's a sight to behold.
Yep.
And what we should be doing is not just saying, "Oh, you're a warrior," but it should be like this is what it looks like. You want to know what the training is? This is what it looks like. And sometimes the biggest advantage a warrior has is they know when to fight, when to engage, when not to engage.
Not to. Yeah,
When
that's
not
a key
to.
thing.
Like we have to teach this is not a hill worth dying on, friend. It's not a hill. And because we teach them, if you go on the hill not worth dying on it, you've just expended your character. They've just expended their future in some senses. So when we're talking about like raising young men who know how to be warriors, it's like know when to fight, but know when not to fight.
Yeah.
But when you're trained. And the biggest motivator behind that, and this is straight out of scripture, is they're peacemakers.
Right.
That's why we fight. I don't fight to for any other reason, which is a difference between being a peacekeeper. Because peacekeeper, man, you can just be a yes man all day long. I know plenty of yes men who just say the thing because they want the paycheck. But if you're going to be a peacemaker, you know what? Your son might get fired and show up at your house crying. Your son might be in a relationship that has to end because he set some boundaries and was trying to fight for that relationship. So like being a peacemaker is important. And especially if you have a real passionate kid, we'll call him that. Like, when I say passion, meaning the one who can flip off the lid real quick, got a short fuse, which isn't a bad thing. It's undirected passion. We have to show them, okay, this is what that means. You need to direct it. You can't just fly off at mom. That's not being a warrior. Actually, that's weak.
That power that's not under control yet, right? And so again, we're crossing kind of into the next piece too, which is mentor. Which as our kids get older, as our sons get older, we're teaching them, we're mentoring them to do the things that a man does, which means we have to fight for those things in ourselves, right? So there's that growth aspect that I've got to be. In myself, I've got to make sure that my own sin is taken care of and that my own character is growing. Then I can help others, and that mentorship, that teaching other people, that reaching backwards in time, backwards in maturity to say, okay, my kids are in high school, your kids are in middle school. Let's talk about where you're about to go, and that's been a extremely gratifying and satisfying thing for me and for April as we've looked around at other families that are farther behind us. We've talked about this in other contexts. We've looked at people who are in front of us and said, "Help us," right? And now we're looking at people who are behind us and saying, "Let me help you." Let me help you to avoid some of the pitfalls and to do some of the wise things that we stumbled on or were shown. And I think those are that's part of that aspect of manhood is to be a mentor, to be that that rock of wisdom, that place where others can go to find the right thing to do.
Yeah, and mentors, they're not always the people speaking the loudest. They're oftentimes the people just speaking the wisest. And when we're teaching our children to be mentors, it's important to put them in situations around people that you respect. And also let them see you around people who you would consider a mentor. My son asks me regularly about even Pastor Dan. You know, we work together. We're kind of coworkers, but there's a lot of things, even which I've shared with you. I'm like, man, I really respect that. That takes a lot of these things. And my sons will ask, I'm like, listen, Pastor Dan, he's a really good mentor in a lot of ways. I want them to see that in me, because how are they going to know to attract to gravitate towards that if they don't see us modeling that? But then I also would say it's equally as important to create, when your children are old enough, experiences where your children can be the mentor.
Right.
Where they can, like for us right now, it's simple. Like Calvin is very good with Legos. We get Delmar a Lego set. He's not. So guess who gets to sit beside him and say, this block means this goes here. It's simple. It's just teaching, but it evolves into mentoring, and men are not meant to just, receive information and keep it in. We're meant to take this information and use it for God's glory, to use it for order, for creation. So this is part of that process. And honestly, this is where some of our, this is where us as men, this is the outlet we need to be the men at home.
Right.
To be the men at home. I mean, we can't lean into this hard enough, and I don't want to come across a certain way, but we live in a culture right now that teaches, well, authentic manhood means he goes home and cries to his wife because he's sensitive. And I'll tell you this, if any woman was dating a guy and every time they got in the car, he just cried because life was so hard, how fast is she going to dump that guy? Does that mean that guy shouldn't have those feelings? Absolutely not. But the problem is, where are you dumping those feelings? That also doesn't mean you shouldn't hide things from your spouse. But what it means is this: your emotions, we should be ready. That's part of us being king, have a dominion over ourselves through the power of Christ. But we need to have a place to take those. And oftentimes, that is a person in your life who you respect. So when you go back home, like we were talking before the podcast, you can walk into your home and be like, I got you. I love you. We're going to be strong. I mean, I was in a place that was a much different emotional place than I was a year and a half ago. And one night, I just, at the end of my rope, I called you. We hadn't even talked in a while. And I was like, Robert, I need objective. You're very black and white sometimes. I need that. Give me this objective stuff right now, because I don't need to unload it on my wife.
Right.
And through the course of that is, quite honestly, why we're sitting here today. So I can even thank you for some of that, how you brought into my life. But we got to have that. And I'll be honest, I don't think I could have, if I'd have walked in the house that night and not had someone to talk to, there's no telling what I would have done. So no one is beyond that. And be very careful if you meet a man who doesn't have a mentor.
Well, and that's that you're also, again, these things all bleed together, because it's all aspects of what each man should be. That's the friendship piece too, right?
100%.
So yes, mentor is someone that I can respect and can draw wisdom from, but friend is this person I can draw strength from, right? That's the guy who's beside me in the foxhole, literally or virtually or whatever, figuratively. He's the one who is maybe closer to me in life, or just someone that I can share that burden with, so that I can go home. Again, God calls us, Christ calls us to be the Christ figure in our families, the way he is the Christ to us, which means the protector, the provider, the one who takes the burdens. We lay our burdens at his feet. Our family should be able to lay their burdens at our feet, but that means I've got to take it someplace, right?
I've got to go.
I can't. And another thing culturally is, to be a man is to be alone, to be stoic, to be by myself, to be independent. There's a place for that to a point, but God also wants us to be in community. He designed us to be together in community, so that we can continue to share with one another, so that we can be strong for our families. But that strength is not just me by myself, gritting my teeth and buckling up. That's me in community with other men, sharing our burdens, sharing our troubles, so that we can then go back to our families and be those rocks.
Yeah, and like you said, the bleed over to be the friend. I mean, in mentoring relationship, have you ever been forced to be in a mentor type for somebody you don't respect? You see how much they mentor you? None.
Yeah.
Even though they think they're trying. If you don't respect them, no, their words mean nothing. Actually, it makes you want to do the opposite, because that's how we are as people.
Yeah.
So even if it's not bad, so we have to realize that being a mentor means that you're under someone or over someone, but there's respect there. So that's the same with our kids. If our children don't respect us because we bring all our baggage home and it translates to our wives publicly in front of our kids in a negative way, or we take it out on our kids, they're not going to respect us. And next thing you know, what authority do we have to speak into them? You only have it positionally, but positional authority does not mean you have actual influence.
Right. And Scripture tells us not to exasperate our children, right? Not to treat them so that they're frustrated with us. We're supposed to love and protect our children. And that's the flip side of children, obey your parents in the Lord. Yeah, but fathers, treat your children respectfully, treat your children consistently, right? Make sure that they know what the rules are and they know how they're going to be enforced lovingly, but enforced, so that they know where those boundaries are and they understand exactly how far they can push. And good Lord, will they push those boundaries right to the limit? But that's part of, especially for boys, that's part of understanding, part of it is their own psychological and spiritual growth, but the other part is they're trying to learn what it is to be that man who lays down guidelines and is the protector. They're trying to figure out, from experience, from watching, they're trying to figure out what it is that we are doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, and I'll encourage, if you're listening, you're a guy and you don't have a mentor, there's someone in your life you respect, and you can go up to him and say, "Hey, you do this really well." And you know what? A lot of times these men, they don't even know. They're like, I didn't even realize. I've never even thought about teaching that. Well, how about this? Try it on me. Let's have that conversation. You don't even have to put it that way. You can take you out from coffee. Let's grab coffee. Hey, I noticed I really love the relationship you have with your children. Can you just tell me some, it could be really natural, because some men who never been afforded the opportunity to be that mentor, they're just waiting. Because they didn't have someone pushing them from a young age. And we live in a culture that really kind of de-emphasizes the value of what men bring to the table. But they do bring that, and it is very distinct, just like there is a very beautiful value that women bring to the table. And we will probably have a podcast on femininity. That'll be the girl cast. We'll be out of the room for that one. But yes, as we do that, and then we mentioned this, but the last component that we don't want to go without, because this is, you can have a sharp blade, but if you're not taking care of it, it dulls.
Yeah.
And I would look at this last component as this is the care in a lot of ways. It's good. It's being a good friend. That's what a real man, he has good friends, which means this: if your child has a friend, and then next week he doesn't, like a best friend, and then that friend's just gone, I would encourage you, don't let your kid just get away with that. Walk them through that. Why is that person no longer your friend? Jesus says in Scripture, I have called you my friends. Jesus, man, ultimate masculinity.
Right.
He had friends. If a friend walks out of your life, and maybe that season is over, but it is our job to process why that season's over. Because if not, we bury it in really bitter ways that comes out in none of what we've talked about today. Mm-hmm. And if need be, let them mourn it. Because when we are being a friend, sometimes they're lifelong friends, sometimes they're seasonal. But one of the things we have control over is not necessarily how my friend is to me, but it's how I am to my friend.
Right. And I think this is another one of those places where our culture is whipping us back and forth. They're saying, yes, a real man is the one who understands his feminine side. Don't know that they use that term anymore, but when I was growing up, but who understands his emotions and is willing to cry in front of his woman. And of course, you can't call her his woman because that's possessive and patriarchal and stuff. But so this whole alpha male piece is running the other direction and saying, well, I'm just going to be the super warrior and I'm going to fight. And so you'll have those friendships that just dissolve because you get in each other's faces because I'm being a warrior. Well, you need to maintain that balance. Sometimes, the warrior piece is fighting the sin in myself that's wanting me to get angry with you and wanting me to get ticked off and to walk away from that relationship. And I know for me, it's difficult for me to maintain relationships over time, especially when there's physical distance there. It's always been difficult for me to do that, and I have to fight for those friendships, and I have to fight to maintain those. But it's extremely valuable to have those dudes that I can call and talk through some of these issues with, or go to lunch with, or by the way, men and women relate to each other differently. So sometimes it's not. Now for me, let's go have a cheeseburger will always work. But for a lot of guys, it's like, I don't want to sit over coffee and just talk because, that's weird.
Let's go shoot something.
Hey, let's go shoot something. Let's go fish. Let's go do whatever it is that the activity is. And I've heard other teachers talk about, women relate face to face and men relate shoulder to shoulder, right? So we're looking the same direction the way warriors do, right? And so we're shoulder to shoulder doing a thing, chopping wood, whatever it is, playing a video game. These things can work. Sometimes a really cool conversation can happen in between, rounds of Mario Kart or, whatever video game you're playing. I know Mario Kart's like forever ago, but still.
It's still good. But that's the thing when we're raising our kids, it's so important that guys, the fathers, do some things shoulder to shoulder with your sons.
Absolutely.
Because when you do that, you are giving them tools for their future friendships. My dad, he taught me how to do archery when I was a kid. We shoot archery all the time. Even though I don't do it anymore, when I meet an archer, we got common language. I can have that conversation. We have a place to start at least because we did some stuff shoulder to shoulder. And this is real hard if we're just trying to be the king, just trying to rule. But what we're not doing is we're not equipping our kids to have the relationships that they need. So it's important that we encourage the friendship, that we don't just encourage it, but we model it. The coolest thing on Saturdays, oftentimes I go yard sale with my dad. It's my dad and one of his best friends. So every Saturday I'm gonna tag along with two boomers. But what's cool to see my dad with one of his friends? Even though I'm 37, there's still a lot. I mean, he's got years of wisdom on me, just knowing how to be a friend. Let your kids hang out with you and your friend. I have a good friend named Brent, and sometimes he'll come to the house, and Calvin will come over and hang out with me and Brent. Getting to see that modeled is so crucial.
Yeah, it is.
So all that to be said, we don't want to just leave the ladies out, because here's the thing. If you got a young girl at home, like I do, these are things you should be looking at in every boy she's interested in.
Right.
Write it down. King, warrior, mentor, friend. Hey, you brought home little John the other day, right? What are his friends like? Well, he doesn't really have any. Okay, why? Maybe it's because he repented and he's in a better place, or maybe because he's a jerk and he takes advantage of people. These are very, very good litmus tests for us to even look as other young men are coming into our family sphere, not just even with your daughter dating, but even your boys who bring in their friends home. Where are they landing within this? I just think this is such a good litmus test, Robert.
Yeah, it is. And if you are fortunate enough and blessed enough to have both sons and daughters, then as you train your sons, your daughters get to see what it is that they need to be looking for in a future husband. And if you only have daughters, that doesn't mean that you can't still model these manly attributes. You should, because it's perhaps even more important to do it properly, because you are that model that your daughter is going to see. And so, for you to be that warrior in yourself and to understand your own shortcomings and to work to grow in your own development, so that she sees what it is that a man is supposed to be. Those are extremely valuable as well.
I saw a great quote that goes along with that this week, and it says, "Fathers, your sons are the ones who grow up and be like you. Your daughters are the ones who grow up and marry someone like you."
Yep.
The way you are in front of your kids, everything is at stake. Generations are at stake.
Absolutely.
So today we wanted to have that conversation. Hopefully it's been an encouragement. King, warrior, mentor, friend. It has been good having the man cast today, Robert.
It is.
But I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to April coming back. So
I always look forward to April coming back.
true that. Well, that being said, I am Delmar.
I'm still Robert.
And we hope you have a great week.